guys, welcome back to Leadership Detectives. Good to have you back here again. Do you know what? In the middle of last week, kind of Wednesday, Thursday, I was feeling a lot less motivated than I normally do. But here I am now at 6:30 a.m. on a Sunday morning, editing and preparing my podcast. So what changed and what happened on Friday or on Saturday that suddenly took me into a different place? And the reality is that Neil and I spoke on Friday and realised that we were both in a very similar rut or dip. And we discussed how to get out of it. And then having gone through that, we thought, well, maybe there's something we should be sharing here. How many leaders find themselves down in a dip or in a rut? Especially where we find ourselves right now at this time of lockdown, coming to the end of what's been a really tough year and preparing for what hopefully will be a much more exciting, challenging and fulfilling year. So we thought, why don't we put something together here? That's what you've got for about the next 20-25 minutes or so. What I would say to you though is, on this one, listen through to the end, because Neil and I have got an offer for you here. There's no cost involved, but maybe it could help you to get ready for a more successful 2021. If there's something we can do there, then we'd like to be able to bring that to you. Listen in, enjoy, speak to you soon. Hey guys, welcome back to Leadership Detectives. Good to see you back here. Been a week or so actually before we've done anything, so it'd be good to just touch base again. How you doing, Neil? How you feeling? You good?
I'm good. I'm feeling pretty good at the moment, actually. I had a good week of kind of catching up on stuff and some good coaching sessions with people. So and feeling pretty strong as well at the moment. I'm following the 4-hour body, slow carb, fat burning diet at the moment to try and get myself ready for the Christmas rush.
Very disciplined of you, mate. I have to say, very disciplined for you to follow that.
Actually, it's not a bad diet. It does include red wine in the evening, and it includes some pretty nice meals as well.
Oh, it's sounding okay then.
It's all right. Yeah.
So interesting, right? You and I have been kind of chatting through the week about what's been going on, and I guess we wanted to have a slightly different conversation today with the team, right?
Well, I think it was becoming. We were trying to work out what to talk about, and we were trying to think what would be really helpful and relevant to what sort of conversations and feedback we're getting at the moment from people we're working with. And it was also very relevant for us.
Yeah.
So we felt like we were going through a bit of a slump. And me personally, I was going through a bit of a motivation slump coming out of October into November. And I have had to apply all of the techniques I know for lifting my motivation. And it was really interesting. This week, I've worked with 2 of my coaching clients who exactly the same thing. In a bit of a rut, they're on calls from 8 in the morning till 6 in the evening, sitting in front of the screen, and they're just not sure where they're going. They're struggling to find the energy and the motivation. And I thought this would be a really good opportunity for us to have a conversation about how do you find the motivation when you haven't got any?
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, look, the why does that happen? We won't go into that, right? It could happen for personal reasons, business reasons, something just you weren't expecting. So the whys are kind of irrelevant. It's you find yourself there. So you find yourself at this point and then you go, well, you could go, now what? Or you don't realize it's even happening to you. And I think that's the worst challenge, right?
I think, and it sneaks up on you. And This is where I think, because when you're really busy, so personally, in October, I had the busiest month I've ever had. And I was working full on. I wasn't actually that well in the middle of it either, but just had to keep going because I was so busy running online training and online courses. You and I were doing that as together. And I came out of October, and because I was so busy, I didn't have time to stop and think how I was feeling. And I realized as I came out of October, my energy, my motivation and my psychology was down at empty. If it was a fuel tank, it was down at empty.
Yeah.
And so the last 3 or 4 weeks, I've really had to work on building that back up and building that energy and that focus back up. And it does sneak up on you. And I was talking to one of my clients the other day, and it's the little things he'd noticed that, he wasn't doing his normal morning routine, his meditation, his running. He kind of got lethargic in those. he was just going through the process of being driven by his calendar, his diary. So you feel like you're doing, but you're not actually achieving. You're just doing, and you're being driven by events. And I think it does sneak up on you, and you suddenly wonder, why am I feeling so down or depressed or unhappy with where I'm going at the moment?
Yeah. I think there's another thing as well, Neil. It's Neil and Albert. And I think people might be surprised to know that we have dips as well, right? So this is not staged, guys. This is genuinely, we're in a dip with one thing and another. And it triggered us to say, well, if there are other people that get into a dip, how do you make it a dip and make sure it's not, something that you drop down to, you don't come back out of, right?
And actually, and full disclosure, so, you and I had a conversation yesterday about the fact we were both feeling a bit, I guess, deflated about the leadership detectives and how that was going, because we created this to try and help leaders. This was really important for us to help leaders. We weren't looking for anything out of it.
Yep.
And what we both discovered yesterday is we really need feedback to know that it's of value. And when we get even a little bit of feedback, it fills us up with energy. Feel good about what we're doing.
But that's also giving us the direction, because if we get that feedback, we know where we want to go next. It gives us a new destination that we're trying to get to, and then we're fired up to go get there, right? Yeah. Without that feedback, we're having to create the next destination. And I have no problem with that, and you have no problem with that, but we don't know it's serving our audience. And we want to make sure we're serving our audience, right?
Correct. Exactly. But there's a real clue there for leadership as well. If you and I, we're pretty self-driven, we're pretty highly motivated. People come to us to get motivated, to get energy. But if you and I need that feedback to motivate us, imagine what it's like for some of the people you're leading in your organization, to the people listening to this.
Yeah.
Especially at the moment, take time to give them feedback, because it's so important to lifting their energy levels up, to know they're doing the right things. And maybe you got to go over the top with it a bit as well.
That's a good point, actually. You can either go over the top, but also just a little snippet, just something fed back. Neil and I were talking to a company last week before, and one of the items of communication we talked about was a study that we'd found said that 90% of people in a work environment appreciated getting bad news rather than getting no news.
Right.
Now, that shocked me, right?
Yeah.
But the fact is, people felt engaged, and that at least they knew someone was speaking to them, and they hadn't been forgotten. So that's an interesting thing. Your conversation of feedback with someone doesn't need to be a big, deep exercise. It just needs to keep communication going.
So I think there's a first clue in there, which is, so as a leader, giving feedback is going to help your team. But what about you?
Yeah.
So maybe one of the things you could do is go and seek feedback from people that you respect, that's going to fill you up with energy. Certainly personally, one of the things I will do is I'll read through old quotes, or I'll read through where someone sent me an email saying, thanks for doing this, Neil, or feedback from a course, or I'll go through some of my social media where people have given real positive, just to get the feedback I need to make me feel okay about things. So that's one of the methods that I tend to use, is look at some of that. In fact, I haven't got it here actually at the moment, but I've got a card somewhere that I was given when I left IBM, and there's loads of fabulous quotes in there. And actually at the time I didn't think anything about it, but about a year later I reread it and it just gave me energy again.
Yeah.
So that feedback, I think, is one of the techniques for sure, is to go and seek and ask feedback from people that you really respect. Well, it works for me. I don't know, does that work for you?
It definitely works for me as well, right? Because the dialogue and the connection with people is what keeps me fired up. If I was to stay in my study with just me and my laptop, and without the phone, and even without the likes of WhatsApp or something, then that would be really bad news for me, because I need that kind of engagement and dialogue. It doesn't even matter what the topic is, right? But at least you've got something to keep things going, right?
So I think, for me, when we're looking at how do you lift yourself up, how do you get yourself, and when I'm coaching people, and this week is really relevant, because I've worked with two people this week with exactly this challenge, which is they're busy doing, but they haven't got the energy as to where they're going and the motivation around that. And this is where I found myself as well. And so what I do when I'm coaching people is I go back to the why. Yep. Go back to, why am I here? Why am I doing this? What is it that I'm hoping to achieve in my personal life or in my business life by taking these actions? What's my vision? What's my passion? And when you go back to that, I find that refocuses me and starts giving me some energy.
Yeah, I agree. That works for me as well. And it's interesting because what I just thought about when you said that was about when we put goals together. Now, we tend to put goals together at convenient points in time, right? It's the start of the year or it's the start of something. So you put those goals together. Revisiting those goals is one way of doing it, because you must, hopefully you had a goal to start with. Now, if you didn't have a goal to start with, that's okay. But if you had a goal to start with, revisiting that goal to go, is that still the goal? And so what is the why behind that goal? Mm-hmm. And if you haven't got one, it's time to get one, because that's going to keep you motivated. But I agree with you. If it works for you, it definitely works for me to kind of stop and take stock.
So the goals, and this is really interesting. When I was working with one person this week, there are two. It depends on the person.
Yeah.
But I believe, and it works for me, and it definitely works for people I coach and work with, is there are two types of goals. There are the personal things that you are hoping to achieve. That might be fabulous holidays you want to go on. It might be skills you want to learn, something you want to buy. There's those personal type goals that energize you and keep you moving. And I always encourage people, and I do this personally, to create a vision board of all those things that really motivate you. And in fact, right, because we were talking about this yesterday, that I was rebuilding my vision board because I'd let it lapse. So I'll show you a picture of it. You won't be able to see much of it, but there's that was what I did yesterday, right? Loads and loads and loads of pictures of everything that motivates me. And it took me about 3 or 4 hours, but it didn't feel like work. The time just went because it was so exciting and energizing to build this vision board. So I think that's really important, is that personal goals. And then there's the business goals. What are you doing to develop your business or your career or your team that you control? Not that you have to put in someone else's, that you control. I think those two things are the goals, the reasons why that I find motivate me and others.
It could be someone's just stalled, right? You've just stalled in what you were doing. So you were waking up every morning, energized, fired up, doing this, and one day you weren't, and then it kind of tailed off, right?
Yeah.
First of all, how do people recognize that?
How do people recognize that the energy is draining?
Yeah.
That's a good question, actually, because how do you recognize it before it becomes a problem?
Yeah.
Because some people do get past the I'm not feeling great to being depressed.
You can have an off day, right? An off day is okay. Right?
And everyone has an off day. Everyone has. So how do you recognize it? I guess I guess everyone's different. For me personally, I find that I feel like I'm trudging through the day rather than flying through the day. I feel like I have to do things rather than I want to do things.
Yeah.
And so I guess it's a feeling for me. I don't know. How is it for you?
Well, I'm very goal driven. And so one day's not a problem. Maybe even 2 days is not a problem. If by kind of day 3, I'm going, what did I achieve? What have I actually achieved? I've put in a lot of effort. I've done a lot of work. I might have even had a lot of conversations. What have I achieved? And if I can't find that I've achieved something, I have to stand back and examine. And it's not obsessive, guys. It's not like, I'm going loony or anything. It's just a question of, am I working towards it, getting to an end result? And even if I'm part way to that result, or have I just passed time?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so I guess kind of the busy fool syndrome, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I actually hear that a lot when I'm working with people. They say, I haven't got time to focus on my goals because I'm too busy on Teams calls. And one of the things I'm certainly noticing at the moment is every Teams meeting or Zoom meeting starts on the hour, finishes on the hour, takes an hour. There's 7 or 8 in a day, and the only time you actually get to do any work is after hours.
Yeah.
And And that is getting people down because they're being driven by events and driven by other people's agendas and not their own goals and their own visions. And, you've just got to take a step back. And I think that you said that earlier. What was it you described as one of your strategies?
About just stopping, standing back, trying to think about what it is I'm trying to achieve.
Yeah.
And writing things down. I have to, if I write things down, even a very simple goal with what I've done. So it's a kind of end result planning exercise. I would go, where am I trying to get to? I don't even know. Okay, so where am I trying to get to? Where am I now? So what are the steps that get me from here to there? I mean, it's a very simple exercise, but then you start building up the energy going, okay, so what I need to do is boom, 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 boom. And then you can start getting fired up again because you can start seeing bits of work or focus or activity that need to be done that gets you towards this end goal. Not that I'm just passing time.
Yeah, actually, so I think there's a key point in what you just said there, actually, is you've got to know where you're going.
Yeah.
Because if you don't know where you're going, as the Cheshire Cat said to Alice in Wonderland, which route should I take? And he says, well, where do you want to go? And she said, I don't know. And he said, well, any route will do. And it's true. So if you don't know where you're going and you don't know why you're doing it, if you haven't got that why for you, your family, your personal growth, then you're going to struggle with that end result because you're not going to know where that end result is. And I think the other thing I've learned, again, coaching people and myself, is if that goal is too big, if it's too far off and it's too big, you have to chunk it down into small, manageable milestones that really make you feel like you're making progress, to start filling you up with energy, positive energy of I'm achieving.
Yeah. I guess what also is in there then is about the length of these objectives or goals that you've got, right? You can have long-term ones, and in parallel, you could have short-term ones, right? So you've got some short wins along the way. So you might have a long-term goal or medium-term goal about going on a particular holiday to a certain place. And there's things you need to do to make that happen. But there might also be some shorter-term goals you've got about just having some fun with the family, right? So you can have those goals, right? These goals don't have to be complex, guys. The goals don't have to be complex, right?
But they have to motivate. They have to
motivate, right? Yeah. And maybe one of the reasons that you're not motivated is because we're working too hard and we're not spending enough time having fun, right?
Could be, right? Yeah, so so you got to plan in that fun as well.
Yeah.
And actually, I wrote that down here as a couple of the things I do when I need to lift myself up. And I did it this morning, just before I came on here, is I love watching those high energy motivational videos on YouTube. I mean, anyone who's done any training with me knows I love it because I show them during the training. I love those high energy motivational videos because it lifts me up. They're over the top and they're extreme and all the rest of it, but it lifts me up. And the other thing I've got a motivational playlist that I just put that on Amazon Music and just have it in the background going, because it energizes me, because all of those songs link me to a place when I was feeling energized. And in fact, a lot of them when you and I were in our 20s going to clubs in London, funny enough.
Exactly. Funny enough, I was talking to a joint colleague of ours, right, the other day, Mr. Price, and he was telling me about Fatback Band and I Found Loving. And he said when he hears that song, he thinks of us. Now, that's a really good point, guys, right? Because music's not for everybody. But the person it's not for, I'd be surprised at. Right? Because music is a different, there's genres and there's different styles. Music makes such a difference to your life, guys. So that's another thing to think about. Maybe one of your strategies might be just sit back and listen to some music and just relax, right? Because it makes your brain work differently. Right?
Yeah.
Maybe that's a strategy here. I can tell you I do, right? I love sticking some music on, and whether it's in the background or whether it's, more front of mind. But that's worth thinking about. It's a really good point you raise.
And to be honest, I'll be completely open on this. We're having a very open conversation today. I put music on and I dance around like I used to when I was in my 20s. Well, I think it feels like that anyway. It probably isn't the same, but
you want to come to my kitchen, Neil? You want to come to my kitchen? It's the same thing.
It's just brilliant, you know. So there are strategies you can use to raise energy instantly, as well as, you know, set these goals, get the reason why sorted out. What other techniques do you use, or do you find works?
The other thing I would say works is take myself away from it. So I'm lucky enough to have my daughter's dog here, right? So I can go for a walk with the dog. And I found that I was going for a walk with the dog with my headphones in, listening to stuff. Mm-hmm. And, you know, for the last 5 days where I've been struggling a little bit, I listen to nothing because it's thinking time. Right. So I'm walking with the dog, just thinking, and you go through some things. There's nothing else to disturb you. If you want to spend time on WhatsApp, great. But I try not to, because I might as well just be sitting at the desk. Right. Mm-hmm. So that's another strategy for me. It's just take myself away from it and allow me to have some free thought, because sometimes you have a eureka moment. Sometimes you suddenly go, I've got it. The other one for me, Neil, and it's interesting, is whenever I used to prepare a big presentation at work, I used to try and plan in what I call the 24-hour rule. Because 24 hours later, something sometimes looks a little bit different. And I don't know why. And you know, people say sleep on it. I never understood that. But I did. You know, sometimes you sleep and you wake up in the morning, you go, that's what I wanted to say. Right? Mm-hmm. I could have been staring at those charts forever. It wasn't coming out. Yeah. So taking yourself away from it, thinking time and relaxation is another thing that I would never put forward in my working days, in my full-time career days.
It was interesting, actually. So one of the things I did yesterday to kind of get me thinking in the right way about my vision and my goals and my reasons why, was I was watching a video interview of Ollie Ollerton, who he was in the Special Boat Service. He was on the programme in the UK, SAS Who Dares Wins. So he's an ex-Special Forces soldier, ran his own private security company in Iraq and Afghanistan. And he was talking, what was really fascinating was he has discovered the power, because he went through a big slump as he was trying to find his purpose, his reason why. And his reason why now is all about helping people achieve more, breakthrough. He's got this thing called Breakpoint, is his new book. But he was talking about the importance of having your reason why, the importance of having goals and chunking them down so you can achieve them. Mm-hmm. The importance of meditation was really interesting. Just taking that time. He said, this is coming from a Special Forces soldier, that importance of meditation. And that really motivated me, listening to him, because it just reminded me of all the stuff I know. But sometimes you need people to help you, just to remind you what you know. And that kind of brings me actually onto a point I was going to make as well, which is I find it really, really powerful to work with and talk to other people when I'm going through one of those lack of motivation, lack of focus, not sure which direction to go in. So, I have a coach who I go to regularly that coaches me and helps me refocus, readjust my mind and where I want to be. I find when I'm coaching other people, it's the same thing. You know, at the end of it, they go, oh, God, I knew all that. I said, yeah, but you just needed someone to show you because you're too busy in the doing.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I get most pleasure out of when someone leaves energized from one of those sessions. But also just having good friends, like you and I talking yesterday, energized me to get on and do stuff.
Yeah.
So I find that really helps as well.
But that kind of brings us back to where we are in this lockdown thing, right? Maybe that's why a lot of people are suffering at the moment, because it might have been what was normally just a couple of beers at the pub. But you were chatting things through and you were talking things and you were sounding things off each other. People wouldn't have seen it as that kind of process. They'd have just seen it as going and having a beer with the boys, right? Or the girls going and having a glass of wine together, right? that conversation and that reflecting things, if it's missing, there's a build-up, right? There's a build-up, and it's going to stop things working the way that they should.
Yeah, and I think there's... I had this debate with someone recently about, can you be vulnerable with your mates in the pub? Or do you need to do that in a coaching type environment or, with close friends? And I think it depends on your group of friends and stuff like that. Because actually, blokes are not great at being in a pub and saying, I'm feeling a bit down at the moment. I'm feeling a bit unenergized. We tend to bullshit and let our ego stand in the way. And so I think it's okay if you've got good close friends, like you and I, and we can have that kind of conversation. But also it can be a bit superficial sometimes when you're in the pub with a bunch of people as well.
I guess you can bring it home as well, right? It depends what your relationships are like at home as well. Some of those conversations you can have at home, some of them you can't, right? So
correct.
What we're saying, guys, is there's a number of strategies here. Yeah. Are you using all of them? We might all use them differently. We might not all use them, but there must be a menu of things you can draw from. That I guess one of the key messages I'm thinking about as we do is, but you've got to do something. Doing nothing is not a strategy. It will not get better. It's like us talking about having difficult conversations.
No. And I think if I was going to, just as we kind of wrapping up, I guess, and pulling this together, we're coming into the middle of November. There's 6 weeks to the end of the year. 2020 has been a tough year for loads of reasons. As we go into 2021, everybody, and especially leaders need to lead by example. Leaders need to create the energy. You can look at 2021 and go into 2021 with the lethargy and the heaviness that 2020 has brought with us. Or you can go into 2021 with a spring in your step, looking at this bright future, seeing this light at the end of the tunnel, because we know there's a vaccine not far away. We know things are going to get better. We know we're going to be going on holiday. We know we're going to be able to get back face to face at some point, whether it's second quarter or third quarter. So go into the year with that energy and passion, because you've got a vision for your own future and you've got a vision for your business and your team that you can share and excite them with. If as a leader, you spend the next 6 weeks building that and sharing that, then I think that would be the best use of people's time at the moment.
Yeah, no, I agree. What you've just brought to my mind as well, Neil, is the picture that you and I have seen, right? So guys, imagine that you've got like a dartboard. You've got a central piece in the middle. You've got one circle around it. You've got another circle around it. The circle in the middle is totally out of your control. You can do nothing about this circle in the middle, right? So let's put coronavirus in there and let's put government policy in there. You can do nothing about that. The next circle around it is the things you can influence. So you can't control them, but you can have an influence on them and make them better than they might have been before. And then the bit around that is you've got total control. You've got total control over what happens in, I don't know, do we have total control what happens in our household? We have a lot of control about what happens in our household. You've got some control about where you spend your time. You've got some control about how much sleep you have, etc. Think about that, guys. The thing I would say to you, come back to this bit in the middle. Don't let it bother you. It doesn't matter. You can't do anything about coronavirus other than your own personal duty that you've got to that. You can't do anything about certain government policy that is there and you have to live with. So don't let it distract you and don't let it draw away from the things you can control to build yourself a more exciting and better life, right?
Yeah. And what you can, the thing you can control the most is what you do and how you feel.
Yeah.
So focus on those things. Focus on those things for yourself. First off, you've got to look after yourself first. On the aeroplane, they say, put your mask on you before you look after someone else. You've got to look after yourself first, and then you've got the oxygen, you've got the energy to look after others.
Yeah.
So I think the energy in my tank is slowly filling up now, and this has helped me having this conversation now. So I appreciate everyone who's listening. Thank you for helping me, and Bertie, thank you.
And what Neil and I did yesterday, by the way, guys, we sat down and we wrote down some things. We wrote down the things that were troubling us, and we're working out how we're going to get beyond that. And we're looking at ways of managing those things that are within our control, right? So think about that yourself as well, right? It's stop, take stock. If writing things down helps for you, and then start looking at ways in which you can manage that. It wasn't part of our plan, by the way, guys, but if anybody needs help with that, tell us. Right? Yeah. I don't mind giving somebody time on the phone or some other way. If it makes a difference, great. Guys, contact us.
So I'll put it out there, right? If anybody wants some help from either of us, no charge, just want some help to refocus themselves, just drop us a message, because we'd love to help you, because it energizes us as well.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Brilliant. Good to see you, mate. And
good to see you, mate.
Looking forward to our next episode.
Absolutely. All the best, guys. See you again. Take care.